One, Donald Trump will rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and he will not take anything off the table, including military action when it comes to the Panama Canal and Greenland. Plus, Facebook stops the censorship. Two, Dr. Gad Saad on the UK grooming gangs, the rape gangs, and the United Kingdom, plus the idea of suicidal empathy. Is the left driven by empathy, or are they driven by hate? Three, New Year's resolutions. It's time for an accountability bowl. How did I do in last year's resolutions, and what will I do this year? It is the Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio in 24 markets across the United States of America. Always live, 12 o'clock Eastern Time, Monday through Thursday, right here at foxnews.com and Fox News YouTube and Fox News Facebook. But on demand, you just have to subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. Donald Trump is speaking as we join you live today. He just got done with the speech. He's now taking questions and answers from reporters. Let's take a minute and bring up those questions and answers. The first of which was, would he rule out, would he take off the table force, either economic force or military force, in accomplishing the goals of the United States of America at the Panama Canal and Greenland? To that, he said no. Let's listen to Donald Trump.
Anyway, I said they're taking advantage. I'm the one that got, and the Secretary General was here, as you know, 2 weeks ago, saying that if it weren't for me, NATO wouldn't even exist right now, because I raised from countries that weren't paying their bills. At that time, 28 countries, 20 of them were not paying their bills, 21 to be exact. They weren't paying, or they were paying a very small portion. And I raised over $680 billion. That was the number he gave, by saying, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. And as soon as I said that, the money came pouring in. But Obama could have said it. Other people could have said it. Bush could have said it. Nobody said it but me. I took a lot of heat. They said, oh, that's a threatening statement. Well, they weren't paying their bills. I said, we're not going to protect you if you're not paying the bills. So in a true sense, I saved NATO, but NATO's taken advantage of us. And one of the problems that I have, and I've said it openly, I said it to President Zelensky, Europe is in for a tiny fraction of the money that we're in. Now, whether you like that situation or not, Europe is much more affected than the United States. We have a thing called the ocean in between us, right? Why are we in for billions and billions of dollars more money than Europe? And, you know, they're a similar size, a little smaller, but they're a similar size economy as the United States when you add them up. And yet Europe is in for
talking about reorganizing the world according to American interest, according to America First. In his speech today, he talked about the new golden age of America centered around common sense. It's always, when it is Donald Trump, funny. He talked about showers, drip, drip, dripping, water faucets, drip, drip, dripping. He talked about electricity and that old saying, it just itches, talking about people that heat their homes through electricity, and it itches. This is put into context with the fact that he's pointing out the Biden administration wants to make everything electric. This after taking drilling rights offshore, and the Biden administration this week ending offshore drilling or limiting offshore drilling, something that would be reversed on day one, according to Donald Trump. He said he's going to re-engineer the American policy according to common sense. It's funny when he talks about it, but it's also instinctually correct and right. It is something that is not so common. That is common sense. And it also is a relationship with the world that serves America first. He wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. He will not take anything off the table when it comes to renegotiating or negotiating the Panama Canal or Greenland, because he is a deal maker, a negotiator. And why would you take certain tools off the table? He's referencing there, as we listen, the relationship with NATO. You negotiate from a position of strength. If you don't pay your fair share, why do we act like you share a common vision in the world? Acknowledging what is quite obvious, that many of the countries that we're supposed to just be in brotherly love with don't share our vision, and many, many, many times are antagonistic to the United States of America. And that applies as well to what's happening with social media, with Facebook, before we get into Facebook, let's take a minute. Let's listen in one more time to Donald Trump.
Day of office, you're going to pardon January 6th defendants. Are you planning to pardon those who were charged with violent offenses?
Well, we're looking at it, and we have other people in there. And as you see, I guess 24 or 28 people came now from the FBI. That came out very quietly. Nobody reported it, but they had people in some form related to the FBI. They had 4 or 5 people that were strongly related to the FBI. We have to find out about that. We have to find out about Hezbollah. We have to find out about who exactly was in that whole thing, because people that did some bad things were not prosecuted. You know, I see it all the time, and you see it too. People that were doing some bad things weren't
This
prosecuted.
entire topic, January 6th, and the types of things that Donald Trump is saying, even when it comes to Greenland and Panama, and certainly when it comes to January 6th, is the type of thing that would have been censored. 4 years ago, Donald Trump was booted off almost every social media platform, every single one, including Pinterest. And here we are today, announced this morning that Facebook will end its fact checker system. Mark Zuckerberg put out a video this morning. I want you to listen to this on Instagram and Facebook, where he talked about we're moving to a new system, not unlike X, with community notes. We're ditching the fact checkers. Listen to Mark Zuckerberg this morning.
We've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. Third, we're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms.
Mark Zuckerberg adopting a look that makes him look like he's about 17 years old, Gen Z. In fact, he looks a little bit like my son. My son doesn't wear the chain outside the T-shirt, but the mop haircut. Mark Zuckerberg, maybe reversing in age. Certainly reversing his course when it comes to censorship. And this is not untied to what is being said right now by Donald Trump. This is a repivot from a position of strength. This is one of the world's richest men, one of the world's most powerful men falling into line with Donald Trump. One of their chief officers this morning, by the way, went on to Fox and Friends and explained why.
First is, as you heard, we're eliminating the third-party fact-checking system. Well-intentioned at the outset, but there's just been too much political bias in what they choose to fact check and how, so we're just scrapping it entirely.
Said they, what do you mean? You mean you?
The fact checkers.
You set up but they're yours.
Well,
right?
So the idea was they're independent fact checkers, but they've just been too biased. And so what we're going to do instead is adopt a system like X has of community notes. So we're just going to rely on our own community of users to provide people more information about what they're seeing. And we think that's going to work.
I'm somewhat skeptical. Donald Trump still speaking, by the way, there at Mar-a-Lago. In fact, he's just stepped aside and invited a guest up to the podium. But I am somewhat skeptical that Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg have seen the light, have found principle. I do think this is a bit of a cultural shift, and maybe we could find more hope in this fact. But this is signifying not just running downhill, not swimming downstream, Donald Trump is the president, but recognizing a cultural shift among the people of America. Look, Jim Gaffigan, comedian, just came out and said, I shouldn't have insulted people to vote for Donald Trump. Kind of a repivot. It's part of my point, a much larger cultural shift that I think is influencing people like Mark Zuckerberg. You can't be this out of touch if you're a businessman. You can't be this out of touch with America. That unless you're trying to shape America. That's what Donald Trump's talking about when it comes to electricity and light bulbs and offshore drilling and itchy electric heaters. Like, this is not a consumer demand-driven enterprise. This is a reshaping of America enterprise. You're not doing this because people want it. You're doing it because you want it for the people of America. Well, Donald, this is a suggestion that Mark Zuckerberg is pivoting, like perhaps Jim Gaffigan or others, pivoting towards America. Not everybody will, by the way. There's been some discussion. What will happen with the media in 2025? And I'll tell you this. I think there's a couple different types of people that make up the media. There are those who will do anything and say anything in order to remain employed. You're going to see some pivots on that front. You will see some people like, wow, I can't believe. And we may be tempted to give them credit. Maybe like, oh, wow, they've seen light. No, they didn't. They got the new marching orders and saw where the audience is. But then there's the true crazies. And the question is, will the true crazies, maybe even the true believers, continue in media in 2025? We brought this up yesterday. Will you continue to hear the likes of this from The View and Sunny Hostin? This is from yesterday.
I think we need to find moral clarity, in this country. And I just remember after January 6th, you had someone like Mitch McConnell placing the blame on January 6th where it belonged, squarely on Donald Trump's shoulders. Mm-hmm. And then you started seeing people backtrack that and losing their moral center. You had Condoleezza Rice, I believe, on this very show saying, we need to move on from January 6th. Mm-hmm. I say no. You don't move on because January 6th was an atrocity. It was one of the worst moments in American history. And when you think about the worst moments in American history, like World War II, things that happened, like the Holocaust, chattel slavery, we need to never forget because past becomes prologue if you forget any race.
It's not just insane. It's so dumb. Well, first of all, the Holocaust is not a story of American history. That's a European story. It's not, and by the way, what kind of absurdity suggests that January 6th is on the same level as the Holocaust or World War II? It's just dumb. Will that continue to be employed in 2025? It's here we are, and I guess I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that there will be this pivot. I'm hopeful because of a shift in American culture, but I'm skeptical that Mark Zuckerberg has seen the light. Will the algorithm still reward certain types of content versus others? Okay, the fact checkers go away, but what will the algorithm do with certain types of content? Because there's no doubt. For example, the Cain Show page, which you should go subscribe to on Facebook, has no doubt been turned down on Facebook. So I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that it's untethered from principle. I'm skeptical about what happens if Donald Trump's approval ratings drop to 30%. I think I'm cynical, and that cynicism has been earned by Zuckerberg, earned by Facebook. But I can be hopeful as well. I can be hopeful that we'll see sanity, that maybe intelligence will be rewarded. I am hopeful that we are in a golden age of America, that Donald Trump and the types of things he's saying right now, speaking about hostage negotiation in Israel. I want to bring this up one more time. I want to hear what he's talking about because everything is built upon a repositioning of America in the world from a position of strength. Donald Trump, from electricity and gas to the Gulf of America to NATO, to negotiating for hostages in Israel, negotiating from a position of strength and what serves America first. Again, let's take a listen to Donald Trump.
She was shot for no reason whatsoever. In fact, they say that she was trying to hold back the crowd, and the crowd was made up of a lot of different people, so we'll see. But I will tell you this, the person that was killed was Ashley Babbitt. The other thing is, when they talk, there was never charges of insurrection or anything like that. But if there were, this would be the only insurrection in history where people went in as insurrectionists with not one gun, okay? And let me tell you, the people that you're talking about have a lot of guns in their home for hunting and for shooting and for entertainment, a lot of good reasons. But there wasn't one gun that they found. And why didn't they find the bomber, the pipe bomber? They know who the pipe bomber is. The FBI knows who it is. The status of the FBI has gone down so far, and the status of the DOJ, or as I call it, the Department of Justice, it's the Department of Injustice. It's being laughed at all over the world. And hopefully with Pam Bondi and with Kash Patel and with other people that we're putting in, that will all come back. If you do a poll in the FBI, I guarantee I'm at like 90% with the agents of the FBI. But
this is stunning in that this is yet another topic that would have not been able to be discussed. This entire press conference today would have been censored 5 years ago. No doubt about it. Everything. And yet everything is grounded in truth, in common sense, in America first. Let's end with a moment of Zen. Here is Senator Kamala Harris certifying the next president of the United States.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 312 votes. Kamala D. Harris. Kamala D. Harris of the state of California has received 226 votes.
That's, I think, the only presidential candidate ever having to certify their own loss, certify the win of Donald J. Trump. Speaker Mike Johnson's face is in and of itself a sitcom in that little moment from yesterday as the certification of the election on January 6th. All right, let's talk more about Facebook. Let's talk about what's going on in the UK. Let's talk about what Donald Trump is saying today with Professor Gad Saad coming up next on The Will Cain Show. Donald Trump will not rule out military coercion if it comes to it, when it comes to making Greenland part of the United States. That's what he's saying right now in a press conference at Mar-a-Lago. It is The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com. On the Fox News YouTube channel, on the Fox News Facebook page, hopefully newly uncensored on the Fox News Facebook, meaning our audience at Facebook should be growing by leaps and bounds. And if not there, we hope you subscribe on Apple or on Spotify. Dr. Gad Saad is joining us now here on The Will Cain Show. He's a friend. He's been on the show a lot. He's also a visiting professor and global ambassador at Northwood University. He's the author of The Parasitic Mind and a new book coming up called Suicidal Empathy, which we're going to be talking about today, Dr. Saad. But if I might, Gad,
Sure.
You've been listening to both Donald Trump and The Will Cain Show today. I think there is a thematic, I always think one of the most interesting things ever said about Donald Trump is that the left takes him literally but not seriously. The right takes him seriously but not literally. Today, he is saying things that should, at least 5 years ago, make the left totally lose their minds and probably censor him. But there's also a serious thematic tie of restructuring, reprioritizing the world order where America thinks of itself and what serves its interests first and sort of holds everyone accountable to common sense. What are your thoughts on what's being said right now by Donald Trump?
I mean, I didn't follow all that he said, but to your general point about America, might is right. That's evolutionary history, right? I mean, history is shaped by the following dynamics. There are two tribes on each side of the river, and each of the two tribes looks at the resources of the other one with envy. And the only thing that stops them from attacking the other tribe is that there are other men in the other tribe that are formidable and would not take kindly to them attacking them. And it is that dynamic that keeps things in check. Now, imagine if a civilization says, no more of that evolutionary imperative of protecting what's ours, of exhibiting kindness, but always with a big stick behind our backs, but rather we're always going to be infinitely kind, infinitely compassionate, infinitely tolerant, even to those who wish to destroy us. That's not a good cocktail, and that's why we end up with the kind of quagmire that we see today in the West.
You know what's fascinating about this analogy, this metaphor you've given us of two tribes across a river? If we were to take that analogy and adjust it for modern times, which you began to there in your answer, is say, okay, but the scenario in modern, at least when it comes to the West, and certainly when it comes to America, is that one tribe is incredibly more powerful than the other tribe. And to your point, historically, might has been right. But that doesn't seem in a lot of ways the way the might views itself today. So the powerful tribe on one side of the river attempts to placate the other tribe, to your point, with kindness. And oftentimes now the other tribe is the one resorting to violence or threats of coercion and force. That can manifest in many different ways. It can even manifest in cancel culture, which was driven by a radical minority. In other words, not the might side of the equation. But they got their way through force and coercion. Sometimes they could threaten your job. Sometimes they threaten your reputation, call you a racist. Sometimes they threaten whatever it may be. And it's like, to me, you're 100%, I love your analogy because we can rationalize, we can say, well, but you should deal logically like this, or you should be empathetic and think of it this. But in the end, it's like, hey, if you keep responding to me in this coercive manner, guess what? I own more coercion. Like, at what point am I forced into the role of force, meaning I being the world power, the side of might? The might has handcuffed itself in many ways and said, I guess I'll let myself be forced and coerced, or I'll even be forced into immoral or wrong situations because I should feel guilty about being mightyful, And at some point, the might is just going to go, time to flex.
Right. So a couple of things I'll say here. Robert Axelrod, a famous political scientist in the 80s, ran simulations of what is the optimal strategy. And when two parties are interacting with each other. And so the reciprocal tit for tat strategy turned out to win, which is begin with the first move as, kind and altruistic, and then watch what the other one does, and then simply reciprocate whatever they do. So if they act kindly, you act kindly. If they act nastily, then you replicate that. And of all the possible modeling strategies, that's the one that wins. Now, it didn't need a fancy political scientist, I think he was at University of Michigan, to understand that there is a relationship, a causal relationship between things. If you do A, I'll do B. Now imagine if we break that thing whereby it's completely parasitic. It's only one way. I grant you endless empathy, but I never expect anything of you in return. And let me add one more fancy professorial content. I wrote an article about a year ago on something that I coined cultural theory of mind. Theory of mind is something that is innate to human sociality. It's when I put myself in your brain, Will, in order to be able to think, well, what is he thinking right now? And then we can engage in a fruitful dialogue, right? Autistic children, by the way, lack theory of mind. That's one of the ways that you're able to diagnose them early as being autistic, because you can give them a theory of mind test, which they fail. Well, imagine now if I argue that there is a cultural theory of mind blindness, whereby the West thinks that kindness, compassion, empathy, magnanimity will be reciprocated, but the other group thinks of each of those things as manifestations of weakness. So they don't look at it as beautiful things to be reciprocated. They see it as weakness, 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 and weakness. That's why I explained on, I can't remember which show it was, that when I speak to people in Arabic, they historically have told me, we can't believe how the West acts. For us, the West is a woman to be mounted. Arabic is a very powerful and flowery language, but that's exactly what it is. Magnanimity is viewed as weakness. The quicker that we can get our politicians to understand theory of mind, the better off we'll be.
I want to get into suicidal empathy, but since you brought up Arabic and it's a current event, I would do, and you have contributed to this conversation unfolding on one platform, on X. We talked about it yesterday. So these grooming gangs of Pakistani Muslim men in the UK who are raping young women, and has been happening, I believe, for, I don't know, Dr. Saad, like, is it a 15-year time frame? Is that a fair, at least that's what it's been?
That would be a conservative one.
That's when it's been revealed.
20 to 30. Sorry?
I think that's when it's been revealed. But you're pointing out it was going on before it was even discussed at all, right?
Yes.
20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this, because, okay, there's several levels of interest to this story. One is the cultural diagnosis of what's going on in South Asia, Pakistan, wherever this is taking place. We know about what's happening in Afghanistan. We've heard from American soldiers who've come back and seen what's taking place in Afghanistan. But then the second level, perhaps even more interesting, is the way that it was handled in the UK, which is back to how the West views itself, kind of what we're talking about here, and the way it was covered up. It was like, and the best way I've seen this written, Dr. Saad, is the UK was more in love with the image, the perfect image of multiculturalism, than the truth of multiculturalism.
Exactly right. Look, and hence that's exactly why the British grooming gangs is front and center in my forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy, because you are rejecting, you are destroying the integrity, the bodily integrity of arguably hundreds of thousands of children at the altar of appearing infinitely tolerant, right? So it's a consequentialist ethic. Yes, it would be nice for us to speak out on these issues, but if we do that, then we will marginalize the hundreds of thousands of Pakistani men who are perfectly kind and lovely. I mean, what kind of insane logic is that? That would be like arguing, don't go after male serial killers, because by going after male serial killers, you will marginalize my dad and my brother, who are also male, but who are not serial killers. It's insane right now. By the way, there's a whole range of retorts that you typically get from people. Either they are Muslim themselves or their Western protectors, to try to justify why it was perfectly reasonable to do the cover up, right? Here is one. They put up pictures of endless white pedophiles, as if that is a valid argument for why you shouldn't go after Pakistani Muslim pedophiles, right? Nobody questions the fact that there are nasty Jewish pedophiles, there are atheist pedophiles, there are Christian pedophiles as per the Catholic Church. So there isn't a monopoly of degeneracy. But that doesn't mean that because that holds true, we don't say that when it comes to the epidemiological realities of what's been happening for the past 20 or 30 years in Britain, there tends to be one group that is grossly overrepresented per capita. And the inability to simply say what I just said is absolutely insane. It is suicidal.
And I was going to say this phrase, if you did not, this pair of wording, per capita. Whenever they do this, they lose the entire ability to understand per capita. I saw a stat this morning that I think it was 3.5 times. So that a British Pakistani Muslim rate of whatever pedophilia, statutory rape, all these, however this crime is categorized, was 3.5 times more likely per capita than if it happened, a white male Brit. It's per capita an issue. And then you have to get to the why. And the why is the most important part. Like, is there a cultural tolerance of it, a cultural acceptance of it? And we know the answer to these things because we can also see the rates of prevalence of it back in home culture, right? We can go back and say, what's happening in Afghanistan, what's happening in Pakistan? And therefore, then you have to deal with cultural relevancy. If you can say, okay, happening more per capita, therefore tied to culture. And by the way, that doesn't mean everybody within the culture practices this degeneracy. But if it happens at a greater rate in this culture, then you start comparing cultures and going, you know what? This is not a better culture, at least in this respect. And therefore, the majority culture, the might culture in this scenario, doesn't have to self-flagellate and go, oh, we're terrible, we can't condemn. This is kind of back to where we started, like the might is right thing. And Donald Trump, this speech he's giving today, he's reorganizing what you said. If you do A, I do B. That's what his whole speech is saying, basically. But we can't have these honest conversations because I don't know what it is. I guess, is it we're supposed to pretend that all cultures are of equal value in the end? There is no bad culture.
They are all equal, except that the West is less equal, right? So, and this is why, this is why I refer to cultural relativism as one of the key parasitic ideas in my 2020 book, The Parasitic Mind. Cultural relativism was an idea that was developed by cultural anthropologists who were worried that the misuse of biology, for example, arguing that there is a innate universal human nature, might result in all sorts of nefarious political agents misusing biology. Say, for example, Hitler, right? There is a race, but there's a struggle between the races. We are the Aryans, you are the Jews. Sorry, Jews, you lost, and the Aryans won, right? So because of that, cultural anthropologists developed a whole new edifice of knowledge where you completely abdicated the role of biology in explaining human affairs. One of which is, who are we to judge the mores of another society? If another society views it within their religious text that it is perfectly permissible to cut off the clitorises of 5-year-old girls, shut up, cultural imperialists. Don't offer any moral judgment to that. So imagine how much that makes you impotent to weigh in on issues if I suddenly lose the reflex to be disgusted at the idea that little girls are going to face female genital mutilation. No, no, no. I do judge. I have the capacity as a free human being to say, you don't have the right to cut off the clitorises of little girls. And if you think I'm a cultural imperialist, F you.
So, okay, now let's tie this into a debate that you're having, Dr. Saad, with a guy that I know, a coworker, Piers Morgan. This took place on X, and we can put up some of the exchange that you had with Piers. Piers had talked about having Tommy Robinson, who's a guy in the UK who's been highlighting, putting a megaphone behind these problems going on in the UK for quite some time. And I guess he was on Piers Morgan's program, and Piers accused him of being Islamophobic, okay? And that's what Piers said. I said he was Islamophobic, which he is. You responded to Piers. You said, Piers, and you were very, very respectful, by the way. You said, please forgive me for questioning you publicly, but what do you mean by Islamophobic specifically? Could you provide a framework under which scrutiny of Islam and its values and constitute fair criticism versus what falls under the rubric of Islamophobia? Perhaps I could ask you the following question. Do you think that the incursion of Islam in Britain has been a net benefit to your country? If so, how? And if not, would this be Islamophobic? He responded to you, by the way, Dr. Saad, and he said, yes, it is a net benefit. He said Islamophobic means having or showing a dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslims. Tommy Robinson is on the record saying these things, and it meets the criteria. Regarding the UK, I think the vast majority of Muslims here are a benefit to our society.
I hope you're going to read my response to that.
What is basically, yeah, so you ask basically, define your terms. What is Islamophobia?
Well, so basically what I said is, to sort of summarize my retort, which people can go and check it on my feed. I said, look, number one, I can criticize communism without harboring any hate to individual Soviets. Let's go back to before the Soviet Union collapsed, right? So the socio-political economic ideology called communism has a set of tenets, which I may either wholeheartedly support or think that they are abhorrent and contrary to human nature. And I could criticize those without holding zero hate towards Igor the Soviet. Yes? By the exact same logic, It doesn't take a fancy evolutionary behavioral scientist. By the exact same logic, I can harbor zero hate towards Muslims as individuals. I know more Muslims who are friends of mine than most people will ever meet by virtue of the fact that I'm from Lebanon. But I could make statements about Islam that in no way could constitute what Piers is referring to as Islamophobia. Does Islam promote sexual liberation of women? If yes, okay. If no, then let's talk about it. Does Islam have orgiastic love or hate towards the Jews? What's the position of Islam? But Piers can't do that because for Piers, he's been inculcated with the Western reflex that to criticize anyone's religion is gauche, right? You don't talk about politics at the dinner table and you never talk about religion. Except if you are criticizing Christianity, in which case you could put a crucifix in urine and call it art, and we all applaud. That's okay. That's progressive. But don't you dare ever criticize Islam. It's Islamophobic. Now, he replied to me, but I just wrote to him before I came on the show saying, I'm going on a show on Fox. I'll respond shortly. So stay tuned. There's more to come with Piers.
Okay. Well, you should have said the Will Cain Show because that really would have chapped his hide. You're doing it not on Piers Morgan tonight, but you're doing it on the Will Cain Show. Oh, okay. I'm so glad you corrected me earlier on something. I said, am I required to believe in cultural relativism? And you corrected that. It's not that we have to believe that all cultures are equal, because what we're really required to believe, as you just pointed out in like, you can put a crucifix in urine, is that the West culturally is actually inferior to these other cultures. Yeah. And your new book, which I haven't read yet, is Suicidal Empathy. Now, I want to run this by you because I came across this thread, and off the top of my head, I cannot remember who wrote it, but I found it very thoughtful. You're familiar, Dr. Saad, with the heat map of concentric circles of left and right and where they extend empathy or where they extend their priorities or where how much they care? Have you seen
I don't
this?
know I don't know the circle that you're speaking of, but I make a similar argument in suicidal empathy, so I can get where you're going with it.
So the right gives its priority and its care to things closest to home, God, family, friends, neighborhood, local, state, on and on until you get to the furthest outreach circles is, just as an example, Ukraine. The left's heat map looks like more care, more empathy on further outer rings of the concentric circles, more for Ukraine than the neighbor or the family. So the argument made by this person on X was, we make the mistake of often thinking that the left is driven by empathy, a care for others. And in your case, you argue for its suicidal nature in many cases. He says, and I'm real careful of this, Dr. Saad, because I don't want to project the worst motivations on my opponents at all occasions, but I found this thoughtful, not partisan. He said it's actually driven by hate. He said it is a hatred of what is similar to you and ultimately what is you. It's ultimately driven by a self-hatred. So what that means is I hate people in my socioeconomic class. I hate people that look like me in my race. I hate people that live like me in my neighborhood. I hate my family. Ultimately, I hate me. It's all driven from something psychologically, internally, and this is how the left is actually being driven. Instead of by empathy, it's at its core being driven by a self-hatred, something they recognize in themselves that they hate, something they see in their family that they hate, something they see in people of the same race as them that they hate, and on and on and on. And that's why their empathy is so far away and theoretical.
So I do discuss these kinds of issues. The question, if I'm questioning the framework of the person that you were reading the thread from, why does that hate exist? And so I offer some explanations. Actually, I was working on that section yesterday in the book. So take, for example, the mechanism of survivor guilt, right? So this is the idea in as a psychiatric condition where the plane crashes and within your row, the 4 people next to you all died, but you survived. And then as you walk away, at first you're happy and elated. Hey, I survived. But then you are completely shackled by this ruminative thought of, but why did I survive? Existentially, I feel guilty now that these 4 lovely people that I was having a chat with died. Why should I survive? And then that can become very debilitating. Now, let's take this mechanism and apply it to the West. If I am a progressive, I think that there is something inherently icky about the fact that I have these riches, but whereas poor Hondurans don't, whereas people in Namibia don't have the same opportunities as I do. And that's why I am self-hating. And hence, the way that I remedy that self-hate, that existential survivor guilt, is that I become orgiastically empathetic to the other. Screw my children. It's Honduran children that are really important. Screw American vets. It's Honduran or El Salvador MS-13 gang members that I should be really funding with free phones and free healthcare. And so I think both the explanation that you gave and the framework that I'm creating can be fitted together to explain the phenomenon.
I think that's right. I think empathy is a generous motivation to extend to people who only have empathy far from home. But I don't think it is mutually exclusive, but rather tied to the idea it's hatred for what is similar and ultimately hatred within that is driving a lot of this. Now, I also always want to say I don't think it's healthy to ascribe the worst of human motivations to people that disagree with you or who might be your opponent. And you always need to look yourself in the mirror and say, what is driving my motivations? It's not, but I did find this very thoughtful, as I know you will be in Suicidal Empathy. Donald Trump is just finished speaking at Mar-a-Lago. He talked about Joe Biden doing away with offshore drilling, the focus on electricity, moving everything to an electrical grid. He said he's in love with electricity and it's itchy. It's a bad way to heat a home. He talked about NATO paying its dues. He talked about not taking even military or economic coercion off the table when it comes to Panama Canal or Greenland. I say this as anyone now joining us here from Donald Trump's live stream as we react to that as well with Dr. Gad Saad today, is all tied together by this idea of re-engineering how you view the world, your role in the world. And by the way, this ties to what I'm talking about with Dr. Saad, not being driven by some fake suicidal empathy, but if you do A, I will do B, because I am more powerful and I trust in my own righteousness. Not that I'm infallible, but I'm also not, as Western civilization, supposed to be apologetic for other cultures that we see, for example, in the UK, that have done horrible things. That's a recap as Donald Trump, by the way, has just finished speaking at Mar-a-Lago. Hey, speaking of cultures, Dr. Saad, who have some seeming sense of self-hatred, yours, Canadian culture. You guys just did away with Justin Trudeau. He just resigned. One of the most anti-free speech authoritarians in Western civilization. Not the most, because I think New Zealand takes the gold medal. But you're on the podium. He was on the podium for most anti-free speech Western leader. And here he is now stepping down. The question I had yesterday, though, is does Canadian culture allow for a man like Justin Trudeau, or does it allow for an alternative?
Well, I'd like to think that there's an autocorrection that's taking place. And so I do think that Ebola would have been a better prime minister than Justin Trudeau. He really, truly exemplifies all of the worst frailties that a human being can possess and none of the redeeming qualities, right? So even Jacinda Ardern, you mentioned New Zealand, she was grotesque, but she wasn't as personally corrupt as Justin Trudeau. He's a malignant narcissist. He's empty-headed. He's arrogant. He's vacuous. He's everything you can hope for in your biggest possible villain that you can, come up with, engineer. So I do think that there is an autocorrection taking place. I think, of course, Pierre Poilievre will certainly be better, but I hold out my full optimism because the number one thing, in my view, that is affecting the future trajectory of Canada is the demographic changes that have taken place in Canada. And so there needs to be a stop of orgiastic immigration coming from countries that abhor our ways. And there needs to be a deportation of many people who don't share our ideals. Whether Pierre Poilievre is able to do it or not, I'm not sure, but at least I'm being optimistic that it'll be a better run.
You say it so well. That's what I talked about yesterday here in my first episode back from the Christmas break. It's like, it's what you and I are talking about. I don't believe in cultural relativism. I certainly believe in the supremacy of Western civilization. And I don't think we should be walking around with self-hatred and importing people who, as you point out, hate our way of life. We've seen the cost of that. We're watching right now the cost of that in the UK. You're doing something similar in Canada, and we are doing that here in the United States of America. You wake up one day, and you are not you. And who you are, America, is pretty special on the entirety of the world stage and throughout human history. Pretty special. You brought up Pierre, and I'm not going to be able to say it because I don't speak French, and I never will be. If you ranked languages that I am capable of just jumping in feet first to the deep end, treading water and pronouncing it right, for some reason, French is like really low for me. Pierre Poilievre?
If you said it French,
how am I doing?
Poilievre.
He is the potential next prime minister of Canada. He's a conservative leader, and he's really good. And that was really illustrated in a exchange he had with I believe it is a Canadian journalist. Let's watch together.
Is this the Apple story? Yes. Okay.
He's eating an apple.
On the topic, in terms of your sort of strategy currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, appealing to people's more emotional levels, I would guess. Certainly you tap very strong ideological language quite frequently.
Like what?
Left wing, this and that, right wing. It's that type of ideological thing.
I never really talk about left or right.
Anyways, a lot of people
really believe in that.
Okay.
No, he goes on, and he's actually not mean. You and I both like rhetoric. We like ideas, and then rhetoric is the putting ideas into words. And he just destroys this reporter who bakes assumption after assumption with, what do you mean by that? Give me an example. Like what? What people say this? Who are you referencing? Because he also bakes in, like, people are saying you're saying this. He goes, what people? Who? Elon Musk did this. I believe it was with I don't remember which journalist he did it with.
Oh, I think it was with the BBC
CNBC,
guy.
maybe.
BBC, maybe.
Okay, BBC.
Maybe, yeah.
Just refused to accept the assumptions baked into the question. Which again, I don't know much about Pierre Poilievre and his politics, but I sure do like his ability of logic and rhetoric right here on display.
Can I add something? The prop of the apple is actually incredibly powerful because it reminds me, and this might be the first time that someone draws an analogy between that prop and spaghetti westerns of the 1960s. If you remember Clint Eastwood in the 60s, I didn't even speak English then. I was a young boy in Lebanon. Arabic was my mother tongue. But then Clint Eastwood comes into a town. He's always got that little small cigar, right? Well, that small cigar said a lot, right? Clint Eastwood didn't have to say much. He just had to kind of show up and do the little cigar thing. And I would say, I want to be that guy when I grow up. So that's what Pierre Poilievre invoked, right? Just very calm, very cool, and biting the apple. And that's how you get people. As you said, there is all sorts of ways of having powerful rhetoric. And in this case, the apple spoke a lot.
Oh, I think you're exactly right. I don't even casual, cool. He's got his sunglasses in the same hand as the apple, effortless. As he thinks through this, and then, by the way, posit the apple and the casualness of eating that apple as you intellectually destroy another human being with simple Socratic questions, with the nervous laughter of the reporter, constant nervous laughter that he tries to guise in some like arrogance or condescension, but it's really paper thin. You know, it's
Why
not.
Is
he doesn't.
It that you're
you can see
able
he
to
doesn't
see
even
that?
believe it.
Why do you see it and I see it, but all of the progressives don't? What is it in our module, in our brain, that allows us to interpret these cues accurately, but they can't? Can you help me with that fancy lawyer?
Well, let's first start with this. Are we accurate? You always have to start there. So if the other side sees that interaction and maybe they see condescension and arrogance in Pierre, I really can't do it, but
Poilievre.
Pierre, if Poilievre, and they don't see the condescension and insecurity in the reporter, we first have to start with, are we accurate? Of course we believe we are, or we wouldn't hold the opinion. I think, I don't know. I truly do believe that self-awareness is the key to wisdom. And that's why you hear me do this. I don't check my premises or look in the mirror because I'm a navel gazer or I'm insecure. I do it because I believe self-awareness is the grounding or the first step to wisdom. Like, you have to start with knowing yourself. And
well,
so I know how I would react.
The Delphic maxim, know thyself, has survived thousands of years, right? It's just 2 words, know thyself. That's why I always tell people, if you've got a self-help guru who's giving you all sorts of very, very broad, prescriptions to life with all sorts of specificity, he's a peddler of BS, right? Because just know thyself has stood the test of time, to your point. And you're exactly right. That's the start of wisdom. Spot on.
So what do you do when you're insecure? You do a fake laughter. That's what Kamala Harris did. And so I don't know why they don't see it. I don't know. I don't. It's the opposite of confirmation bias, right? Confirmation bias is, oh, he said something that I already believed, therefore it's right. And so the left looks at that scenario and says, Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah, you're almost there.
Is Poilievre is he is the totalitarian, he is the arrogant one, and so here's the humble reporter simply speaking truth to power. And of course, all of his assumptions are correct. Of course, there's people saying you're an ideologue. Of course, there's people saying you're a populist. I don't know. I don't think they know themselves.
No, I think, but just to add to your point, I think that, so if I'm a progressive and I see that interaction, my mind and my senses completely shut out that nervous laugh of the reporter. All I see screaming at me is the next Hitler, right? Because he is conservative. Therefore, if he's conservative, he's probably going to round up all the indigenous people and the trans people. And so that's screaming at me. So my senses can't even pick up the condescension that you're speaking of, or the arrogance or the insecurity, because there's a much louder scream coming at me. It's called the label of conservative. So maybe that's why they don't see what we see.
I think that's right. I think this last topic I want to ask you about ties it together. So if there's a theme to you and I listening to Donald Trump today, the cultural repivot of even Facebook, and then bringing in what we're talking about with the UK grooming gangs and so forth, it's dealing with cultures and, knowing yourself, hating yourself versus, knowing yourself and understanding your role in human history and not taking on these other cultures because you believe there's something wrong with yourself. Joe Biden gave away, I don't know what it ended up being. Was it 24 or so Presidential Medal of Freedoms? And, it was Denzel Washington was included, Lionel Messi, your guy, Lionel Messi got one. Yeah.
But he didn't show up to it.
But he didn't show up. Yeah, I know. I don't know why. But George Soros got one. Yes, and I don't think there's ever been a better historical figure that illustrates the hatred of Western civilization and the funding of its dismantling than George Soros. And for that, by the current modern-day American left, embodied by Joe Biden, he gets the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
It's unbelievable. And as did Hillary Clinton. So, imagine a world where Hillary Clinton and George Soros are lauded as bastions of freedom, but Elon Musk is completely ignored because, he's a billionaire guy who meddles in other people's affairs. So when Bill Gates meddles, good. When George Soros meddles, good. When Mark Zuckerberg meddles, good. When Elon does, he must be some sort of pro-apartheid monster from South Africa. It's absolutely insane. It's so hypocritical. It's so dishonest. But hopefully we're going to turn that ship around, Will.
I think there is a potential. Let me ask you that as we end, because it'll tie to Facebook. It does feel like a golden age in a bit, Dr. Saad. It does, or at least on the doorstep of a potential golden age, because it feels like there is a cultural shift in America. Forget the leadership change for a moment. The leadership change is a reflection of a cultural change in America. And the question is, have we and can we shift to moving away from self-hatred of Western civilization and the exalted place of the United States of America? Can we do that? Is Facebook really recognizing this cultural shift? Are these corporate CEOs? Or are they just going, oh, you know what? The mogul on the ski hill currently reads as follows, and we need to jump down a few notches on the Donald Trump moguls?
Yeah. So to your point, I've often been asked, do you think that now that Donald Trump has gotten his second term, we're done with woke stuff? And my answer is an emphatic no. Is there reason to celebrate orgiastically? Absolutely, because the alternative would have been disastrous. But it took 50 to 100 years for all of these parasitic ideas and suicidal empathy and these reflex of self-hatred to be promulgated into every nook and cranny of our society. So it's going to take a lot more than just Donald Trump for the next 4 years to completely eradicate this. So don't be complacent. Yes, celebrate for a moment or two on January 20th, but there's a lot more work to be done to completely eradicate this nonsense. Hopefully it won't be 50 to 100 years, but it will be a lot more than just one term of Donald Trump.
All right, I know your fingers are itching to get back to X and go after Piers Morgan. So I'm going to let him go. But you listening at home, watching on YouTube and Facebook, need to know that he's already written The Parasitic Mind, this new book, which is, it's not just the centerpiece of the conversation we've had here today, but I think the centerpiece of a lot of what's happening. And we just hit 5 news stories, including the press conference today by Donald Trump, that I do think at a deep level is tied to the idea of suicidal empathy, the title of his upcoming book. It is Visiting Professor and Global Ambassador at Northwood University, Dr. Gad Saad. Always love talking to you, Gad. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Will. Cheers. Take care. Bye.
Oh, okay. There he goes. Okay. It's over. Well, not for all of you, but the NFL season is over for me and the Dallas Cowboys. It's also over for the Tennessee Titans and the Cleveland Browns. What do we think should happen in the NFL draft? Cam Ward, quarterback at the top. How high do you take a running back? Should you draft a running back in the first round? That plus, let's begin the conversation. I can't finish it today. Let's begin the conversation of resolutions for the new year in 2025. Coming up on The Will Cain Show. What are we going to do in 2025? New Year's resolutions here together on The Will Cain Show. Streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, Fox News Facebook page, 12 o'clock Eastern time every Monday through Thursday. But head over to Spotify or Apple, hit subscribe, and you can listen to us whenever you like. You can join the Willish over on YouTube or Facebook. Some good comments here today. This is a great question from Suzanne. She says, hey, would Mark Zuckerberg have made this same move if Kamala won? Makes you wonder a bit. You guys in New York, let's just go around the horn real quick. Do you think so? Because I got my answer quick. No.
No.
Kamala wins.
Absolutely not.
He does not do away with this. Right.
4 no's.
No way, right, Tinfoil?
I think.
I think he's been treading this way before the election. So I don't know. I'm kind of undecided.
So you're more open to the idea. The other three of us are pretty sure. And Dale Yancey says on YouTube, glad you're skeptical of Mark Zuckerberg. He will say whatever our politicians want to hear and then walk out of the room with a smirk on his face thinking, fooled them again.
Yep.
Boy, you know that conversation we just had, which was a fascinating conversation with Dr. Gad Saad. And like, he asked me why I read that into that reporter talking to Pierre Poilievre. And Poilievre. I can't do it. French, I'm telling you, there's something about it.
Je parle français un peu.
Je m'appelle.
Really?
Yeah.
2 days? You can speak French?
Yeah.
Oui, oui, beaucoup.
Like, 2 days, let me ask you a question. Like, with your Brooklyn brunch crew yesterday, and we talked about, this all ties together. Like, coolest languages that you can speak, most masculine language to speak, how much insecurity do you have when you say you speak French? Like, it's the least, like,
it's
dudes
a cool
walk
language.
into a room, right? Let's be honest, all of us together. We're going to take a vote, okay? I'm going to give you 4 languages, and we're going to rank them on coolest, okay? I speak a second language. Oh, you do? What is it? Okay. Spanish, German, Italian, French. Let's go around the horn real quick. I just want first and last. Tinfoil. Coolest, least
German.
Cool. Tinfoil.
Yeah, German is the coolest. And the worst is French.
Yeah.
Except I could make an argument, but I'm not going to right now because it would go too long. Anyway, but French is a little sissy. Yeah.
It's because you don't like the French.
Yeah, it's a little sissy.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm sorry, man. It's a little sissy. Go ahead, two days. You get your vote. Coolest is what?
German. I have German heritage, so I'm going to say that first. So German, it's hard. It's da, da, da.
You guys are really intent on making this the alt-right show at Fox, huh? Everybody thinks Germany's the coolest. You guys...
Sorry. I'll go Spanish, then French, then Italian.
So German, Spanish, French, Italian. So you even acknowledge your own as third.
Third.
Okay. All right, young establishment James, give me first and last on those 4 languages.
So French is definitely the worst, without a question. The other 3, it's a little harder. I'm going to go with Spanish because I always like being able to talk to the guys at the deli or having a couple Coronas watching soccer.
Yes.
Like it's...
Yes.
Although, in high school...
Mine is...
In high school, I did take Spanish,
in Westchester.
and I had an option to either have a free period or also take French, and all the attractive girls were taking French. So
That's what I did.
I decided I was going to
Exactly.
take French, too.
That is exactly why I took French.
Then we quit after a year.
I get that.
Because all the
Yeah,
cute
but that
girls were
tells you
taking
something as
French.
well.
But it does, right? It's because the girls like it.
I just proved
So in
my
the
point.
Northeast,
Your point.
young establishment James was popping his pastel collar and headed over to
Probably
French,
wearing, like,
and
exactly
you with
this.
You with
Like
your
10 years old.
hipster beard in 9th grade were like, I'm taking French too.
Heck yeah.
Check out my guitar, ladies.
Heck yeah. I know how to sing in French too, which is great.
Je jouais baseball.
Oh boy. 1 Spanish, 4 French. And Spanish is coolest. I mean, I'll admit it. I mean, but it's actually all of us now. It's not just Texas. Like, it's the most applicable. Like, you speak German. Where are you speaking German? You're not. Unless you go to Germany.
Business.
Like,
If you're an
at least
engineer.
in Spanish.
of German.
But like in my life, when you break out a little bit of Spanish, everybody's like, "Oh, wait, look at that!" Because there's opportunities to speak Spanish. There are no
Texas
opportunities
bias.
to speak French.
Joelle Rutledge in the chat is saying French is a romantic language. Thank you, Joelle. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, we know.
Very
Joel.
So it's Italian and
We know.
Spanish.
All my barbers,
right, exactly.
barbers
Thank
speak
you, Tim.
Italian. They speak Italian to each other while they're giving the haircuts.
Yeah, talking trash about you.
Real quick, if I throw in Japanese, does that throw off your rankings? You can speak Japanese.
Ohio gozaimasu.
Does that-
Genki desu ka?
What?
I can speak a little Japanese too.
What?
Who is working on our show?
I took Japanese in college. I don't know.
Okay.
We have
that's
got
hard.
a Brooklyn brunch hipster, tattooed guitar player, bearded alternative Japanese and French speaker who is making his way into understanding the right side of the world on the path.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm getting there day by day, minute by minute, hour by hour.
Also a sports fan, so we should throw that in. Sports fan, so something redeeming.
Renaissance man.
Yeah. French,
So,
the Renaissance.
Thank you for the reference.
So we'll. So let me get to New Year's resolution in just a moment. But since we invoked sports, the NFL season is over. The Tennessee Titans have the #1 overall pick. It's followed by the Cleveland Browns, and I believe who's third? Is it the New England Patriots?
We're
with the
fourth.
third overall pick.
They went down to 4.
Fourth.
Are the
It's
Raiders
a quarterback hungry team that is third.
Yeah, because it's probably gonna be two quarterbacks, Travis Hunter, and then the Patriots are. It seems like they're zoning in on that D lineman. Titans, Browns, Giants, Patriots, Jaguars.
Yeah.
Browns. Okay. They threw the last.
So you guys
game.
are at 5.
They benched Jameis and threw the last few games there.
Cowboys are at 12. I think.
Here we are. Yeah. Any concentric circle of connection to Jameis Winston turned to tinfoil Pat. Here's the question. I believe that quarterback play in college has become so speculative that it is even less projectable than it was when it was a 50-50 proposition into the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it historically has been, right? I cannot look at, and I watch college football, I cannot look at you guys and tell you Cam Ward is worth the overall #1 pick. Same with Shedeur Sanders. But I also can't tell you they're not. I can't say no way would I draft Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. And I think the best example of this is Jaden Daniels. I saw people saying, it was just like a rehash from last year, that Jaden Daniels was terrible doing the whiteboard on the Gruden type camp and this and that. And look at him his first year in the NFL. I mean, he'll be Rookie of the Year, right? I mean, he'll run away with it. And he was great. He was a difference maker for the Washington Redskins turned Commanders. So, I mean, could Cam Ward have the same effect? Maybe, I guess. If it were me, I would probably go Shedeur Sanders. And I think that my thing with Shedeur is this. I saw somebody make this argument. He has played with inferior talent at several levels, meaning he hasn't had not at Colorado either. He hadn't had the athletes that Cam Ward has had at Miami. I know Cam Ward was at Washington State before that. But I think that there is an overreaction to Shedeur where people are overreacting to Deion and Shedeur and the hype around them. And you can compensate for it without bankrupting it. Do you know what I mean? So it's a stock, right? And the Shedeur Sanders hype train has made the stock worth $100. And you're like, yeah, but it's actually worth $70. Okay, but don't convince yourself it's worth $0. It's not worth $0. And I think even if he's overhyped, the $70 version of that stock is probably the quarterback that I would bet on to go get in the NFL. Tinfoil, you're shaking your head no. Is this because you're going to be contrarian to the hype about Shedeur Sanders? What are you dutifully typing on your computer?
I saw a thread. I'm trying to find it. And they were like, this person had all the reasons like Shedeur is a terrible choice to even go first, and I can't find it now. But I had saved it, and I was going to...
By the way, we've had an hour-long show today, including a deep, thoughtful conversation with Dr. Gad Saad. In the course of this show, including me, I've done this as well. We have all invoked some thread we saw somewhere on X half a dozen times. This is modern-day citation.
Yeah.
This is modern-day citation.
Where are your sources?
Who did that thread? There's Jonathan Knight.
What are your sources?
Tom Pelissero on the Rich Eisen show said multiple scouts don't have a first-round grade on Shedeur. I've talked to people within the league who don't have anything close to a first-round grade. And this person was laying out all kinds of things. Like I don't know. I don't really buy it. But
by the way, I had a conversation with someone, you three know who, but we're going to leave it there, over Christmas break, who told me that Quinn Ewers was a 5th-round draft pick.
Wow.
Nothing more.
5th.
Okay, so here's what's interesting. If
like
that's
him.
true, there are reports that the Texas Longhorns quarterback Quinn Ewers will get offered $4 to $5 million next year in NIL to go wherever, whoever's doing that.
UNC.
We're about to watch with Quinn Ewers Possibly, because they say that he's got to transfer because they're going to turn the team over to Arch Manning, right? Now, by the way, if Texas wins the national championship, what a pickle that is, right? But you could argue if they win the national championship, then Quinn's draft stock goes up.
I don't know if they will.
But real quick, we're about to watch this. Is this going to be the first time when a quarterback who could be drafted chooses to go back to college because he could make more money in college? Like, has that happened yet? Because we might just be about to watch that happen with Quinn Ewers.
Possible.
Might
be. It
be.
just went pretty quiet.
Cam-
I feel
Cam
like there was
Ward-
one situation, right? Someone went not for money, but someone went back.
Cam Ward came back because he got a bad draft rating, and then he improved it. But he did get a few million, but it wasn't. Was that it?
Sam Bradford stayed next year.
I do have to point out, Will, when you had Andrew Perloff on the Sports Pod, you did have a bet about Cam Ward and Quinn Ewers. So I'm just saying.
I remember.
Looks like
I
Cam
bet
was
Perloff that Ewers would go ahead of Cam Ward.
You know what though? Like you're watching that quarterfinal.
That was a Philly cheesesteak versus brisket bet.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. So
I'm gonna have to send him brisket.
Yeah, it's looking like it.
All of the throws that Quinn Ewers makes, he had a lot of mistakes in that quarterfinal game, but the throws he makes look pro style. Quick, hard, fast, tight windows.
That ain't the conversation in Texas. No. The conversation is 4th and 13. All right. Did it when you had to do it. And then in overtime. By the way, when you guys were watching Texas versus Arizona State, did you come back? I guess it was ESPN. Did they cut back from commercial into double overtime? Like, you didn't even see the play hardly. You just saw the pass being thrown to Gunnar Helm for the touchdown. You know what I'm talking about?
No,
there was no
the
lead up.
I was watching
we came back from commercial.
I saw the snap. I remember.
I felt like we were coming back from commercial, and he was throwing the pass. Basically, the game-winning pass.
I remember seeing the whole thing, I think.
I think I saw the whole play.
Yeah.
But it was
Would you take
Twitter watching
a running back in the first round? If you're the Cowboys, would you take Ashton Genty?
Heck no.
From Boise?
He didn't even have that great of a game.
Really?
Heck no.
He didn't even have that good of a game.
Nope.
His backup had a better game.
You would
than
not.
him.
I mean, the way the game
Absolutely
is,
not.
you can't put that much on a running back.
We just look at John Ashbrook.
You
He
get
put
one contract
everything
out of him.
Put everything on McCaffrey
Gotta look at the
this
future.
year, and then his team didn't even make the playoffs.
We got to talk about that tomorrow. We're not going to jam that in. I forgot. So much happened over the break.
Oh.
Right. We've got to update the audience on the Will Cain Show, Friends of the Will Cain Show Fantasy Football League, which had its championship over the break. We're not going to do it right now because it deserves its own 10-minute segment. Deep tease, tune in tomorrow. We got to let you know who won. Was it Byron Donalds? Was it Andy McCarthy? Was it Will Cain? Was it any of the three guys working the show? Who won the Will Cain Show, Friends of the Will Cain Show Fantasy League? That's coming up tomorrow. I have had it on my list. 2 years ago, I did 20 New Year's resolutions, right? I'm really happy with those. You laugh, but
No, those
I
were
probably
good.
got
10 or 11 of them.
I think I batted 50%, 9, 10, 11 of them, something like that range I accomplished. And looking back on it, and they were specific. That was a heck of a deal. Last year, I thought I overdid it, so I went down to 5, but they were more generic. Now, together, we've gone through those, right, Tinfoil? You have presented those to me, and I failed. I think I got 2 or 1.5 of the 5.
Yeah, I don't think we played the segment though. So I mean, do we need to go back over them for the folks at home?
Do you have them in front of you?
I do. I wrote them out for that segment. Are you ready?
Well, give me my New Year's resolutions, and let's grade myself in an accountability bowl.
Do you want to go through all 5 real quick, or do you want to stop at each one?
Quick, one at a time, quick.
Okay. Number 1, I'm going to wake up approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes earlier than I normally wake up without an alarm clock.
Fail.
I think you get a pass on that. You're a morning TV show
I'm doubling
host.
down on that. I'm doubling down. That's actually something I've been thinking about for this year.
You want 3 hours now?
I want to be a morning workout guy. I want to work out first thing in the morning. And 2025, I'm doing that. I'm getting up. So I just have to get up early enough to make the workout happen. That's what I want going into 2025. Failed in 2024. What else?
I'm going to sign up for 3 to 4 physical challenges. I think you did halfway. You about 50% on that.
I failed. I did the rowing challenge and the Navy SEAL swim. I'm doing both of those again this year. I did not get a third in last year. And I would like to try that one again, too. So,
all right.
Double down.
There we go.
Double down.
Now, I don't know how to do this, but I think the way to do this is no phone. That means no social media, no streaming, no television shows or series.
After dinner. That's what it was. Or during dinner.
After dinner?
Something like that.
During dinner.
I don't remember the dinner part.
That's what it was. I wasn't just
you wanted more
I wasn't
family.
going to use my phone in 2024.
Yes.
You wanted more, like with the family, right? Like, so there's probably a window, like 6 to 10.
It was. There was a window around dinner. I think it was an hour before, an hour after dinner. That's what it was, I think. I failed miserably.
Come on, man.
Face in the mud.
Come on, man.
You have to retire that pretty soon. I want to read 10 books. Now, this doesn't mean books that I get assigned or have to read for the show. I mean books that I want to read.
Oh, shoot.
Like outside. That's why I got you the fiction.
I did not do. I definitely read 10 books, including those assigned for the show. I did not read 10 leisure books. But Tinfoil Pat sent me 2, by the way. He sends me books, and I appreciate it. He sent me 2 for Christmas. You sent me Atomic Habits and another Barbara Kingsolver novel because I liked Demon Copperhead so much. You sent me another one, which I appreciate.
Right. And the boys got
All right, what was the last one?
Book.
Thank you, Patrick.
Good man.
Yeah. He's on next tomorrow.
You'd
and our last. Do what?
Go ahead. As you sent 2 to my desk, I'm like, wow, 2. One's for Dan.
Number
you got
5
the guys'
is
Jocko books, and Jocko's on tomorrow. Here's a question, Patrick. Were those comp books from Jocko and his publicist that you gave to the guys, or did you buy them?
No, it was out of my pocket.
They were Amazon. They were from Amazon.
Amazon.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we're starting the year off right.
Tomorrow.
I read it. Yeah. I finished it.
I think I got James that last year. Was that? Yeah. I want to be better at relationships. This is Will talking. In 2023, I talked about it. Give away love, give away money, give away time. And so you want to play golf with buddies, want to go duck hunting, want to go on trips. You want to text people once a week, once a day, somebody you haven't reached out to in a while.
That one was too big. That's a lot to jam into one resolution. Well, I'm going to give myself a fail on that.
Yeah.
I did. I think I did.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up with new resolutions. I'm going to learn from 2023. They have to be specific. They have to be short. And I don't care how many there are. If there's 30, there's 30. If there's 10, there's 10. And I'm going to do them. I've sort of been waiting to because we've got a lot coming up that I want to talk to you guys about here on the Will Cain Show throughout the week. This week, hopefully. We'll talk more about everything coming up here with the Will Cain Show. But here's the tease, as mentioned just by Tinfoil Pat. Tomorrow, right here, Jocko Willink on the Will Cain Show. We've got a big show tomorrow and all this week. We hope you'll hang out with us and be here again, same time, same place, 12 o'clock Eastern time. Fox News YouTube, Fox News Facebook, Apple, Spotify. I'll see you next time.